There are things happening in the Arctic now that would have been unthinkable 20 years ago.
A helicopter skims Antarctica's plateau, following coordinates that belong to no one, yet tempt nations that can reach them. It once felt like science, until measurements showed this ice could lift seas by 58 meters and redraw coastlines. When Antarctica becomes leverage, who decides? Antarctica looks like a blank page, a continent erased into white and silence. Up close, it feels even emptier, because sound dies in the cold air and the horizon refuses to end. That emptiness is the first trick the ice plays on the mind, because it invites the belief that nothing here can be taken, and nothing here can be lost. But the ice is not a lid. It is a vault, stacked kilometer upon kilometer above mountains, valleys, and ancient seafloor. Beneath it sit fresh water locked in place, ecosystems that survive in darkness, and geological layers that record Earth's most violent climate swings. When nations argue about Antarctica, they are rarely arguing about penguins or postcards. They are arguing about what the future will demand when scarcity spreads, and who will already be standing on the coldest ground when that moment arrives. Even the weather acts like a gatekeeper, with katabatic winds that pour downhill and shred tents. Yet blizzards cannot hide satellites, runways, fuel caches, or antennas. In Antarctica, presence is a language, and the first sentence is arriving. Antarctica is governed by agreements that do something rare in geopolitics. They freeze the argument without settling it. The Antarctic Treaty, signed in 1959 and in force from 1961, set the continent aside for peaceful purposes and scientific cooperation, while banning military measures like weapons tests and fortifications. It did not erase territorial claims. It suspended their escalation, letting claimant states hold positions without expanding them, and letting non-claimants operate without recognizing any claim. That ambiguity is the mechanism that keeps Antarctica from becoming a battlefield on paper. The treaty system added conservation rules, including the Protocol on Environmental Protection, agreed in 1991, which prohibits mineral resource activities other than scientific research. Enforcement is not a police force, it is transparency. Treaty parties can inspect stations, ships, and aircraft, so access is built into the architecture of peace. In a place with no customs gates, influence comes from logistics, data, and the ability to show up, look closely, and publish first while speaking the language of science. And the pressure point is time. The mining ban cannot simply lapse, but the protocol allows a review after 50 years. In 2048, the conversation can reopen, and presence can suddenly matter more for everyone. Consultative status, earned through substantial research, grants a voice at decision meetings, so science and governance interlock. Consensus slows change, but it rewards whoever arrives prepared with maps, instruments, and monitoring networks. Claims stay frozen, yet long-term presence grows through laboratories, airfields, and archives. Officially, Antarctica is not for sale, and mining is illegal except for research. Unofficially, the continent pulls governments like gravity because resources are real and information is strategic. The Southern Ocean is among the richest fishing zones, and catches of toothfish and krill feed global markets. When quotas are argued inside the Commission for the Conservation of Antarctic Marine Living Resources, the debate is about ecology and about who gets a long share of a food system the warming world will strain. Bioprospecting is quieter, with fewer headlines and bigger downstream value. Microbes adapted to extreme cold produce enzymes that function at low temperatures, useful for medicines, industry, and genetics. The science is public, but patents often are not, turning sampling trips into a race for ideas. Data becomes cargo, ice cores, calibration sites, and models that sharpen forecasts. Even if minerals stay locked away, mapping matters. Geological surveys, airborne radar, and gravity measurements build a knowledge base that outlasts politics and becomes relevant if rules change or loopholes widen. Nations do not need to drill to signal interest. They can fund research teams, publish maps, and store samples in repositories that make future extraction easier. In Antarctica, the gold rush is often a paperwork rush, where the prize is being first to understand what lies underneath and first to justify why you should remain. If treaties are the script, Infrastructure is the staging, because Antarctica rewards the countries that can move people and equipment when the sky is hostile. A station is not just a building. It is a supply chain stretched across oceans, air corridors, and fuel depots. Every runway cut into ice, every pier reinforced against pack ice, every over-snow route is a statement that a nation can operate here without asking permission from weather or distance. That is why the most telling changes are practical. Expanded airfields that accept heavier aircraft, satellites that improve high-latitude communications, and power systems that keep winter crews alive when darkness lasts for months. Some facilities focus openly on research, from astronomy to atmospheric sampling to glaciology. Others center on logistics and mapping, work framed as science while also serving readiness. Dual use is unavoidable because the same radar that tracks storms can track aircraft, and the same antenna that sends climate data can support secure communications. Influence is also built through collaboration because partnerships decide who gets access to airlift, icebreakers, and remote field camps. A country with fewer polar assets can gain presence through joint missions and co-authored research, while a country with deep logistics can become a hub others depend upon. That dependency can shape votes inside treaty meetings without a single threat being spoken aloud. Even small choices matter, like where to place a fuel cache or how often to resupply a remote camp. In a landscape that punishes failure, capability becomes credibility, and credibility becomes long-term leverage. For decades, Antarctica could sound abstract, a legal puzzle wrapped in snow. Then science forced everyone to picture consequences in familiar places: docks, highways, neighborhoods only a few meters above the sea. Antarctica holds enough land ice that, if it were all lost, global average sea level would rise by about 58 meters, the difference between modern coastlines and a remapped planet. West Antarctica alone carries roughly 3 meters of sea level potential, and its glaciers flow into vulnerable ice shelves that act like braces holding back the interior. What is confirmed is the mechanism. When floating shelves thin or collapse, they reduce buttressing, and ice on land can accelerate toward the ocean. What remains under study is timing, because ice dynamics are complex and regional, and collapse can unfold as cascades rather than straight lines. Researchers track this with satellites, GPS stations, airborne radar, and field measurements of ocean heat slipping under shelves. Every dataset is a piece of a chain reaction, and every season adds clarity on how close certain basins are to thresholds that are hard to reverse. This is where control changes meaning. Influence over Antarctica is influence over future risk. Monitoring networks, access to critical regions, and the ability to keep instruments operating year after year become power. Not because they let a nation own the ice, but because they let a nation shape global understanding and policy responses. In the cold, the most valuable asset is foresight. Once Antarctica becomes a place that can raise seas and shift fisheries, the pressure points multiply. Tourism has surged, with expedition ships carrying visitors into fragile landing sites where a spill or grounding can become a long-term scar. Search and rescue capacity is thin, so a major incident would force cooperation fast, while revealing who has aircraft, fuel, and medical reach to respond. Shipping and satellite coverage add another layer. As sea ice patterns shift, parts of the Southern Ocean can become more navigable in some seasons, bringing traffic near sensitive ecosystems and increasing the value of accurate forecasting. High-latitude communications and Earth observation underpin navigation, climate monitoring, and global security systems, making Antarctic ground stations and relay points more valuable than their quiet appearance suggests. Even enforcing rules, such as illegal fishing patrols, depends on expensive assets, and enforcement gaps widen when budgets shrink or storms intensify. Inside the treaty system, decisions hinge on consensus, and consensus can be stalled by states that want time, leverage, or concessions. That creates a slow contest over protected areas, catch limits, and standards. None of this requires hostile acts, because delay itself can be strategy. The continent does not need a shooting war to become contested. It only needs rising stakes, more actors, and a system that rewards whoever can endure negotiations while maintaining steady operations on the ice. In most places, control means borders and ownership defended by force. In Antarctica, control is softer because the treaty blocks conquest while rewarding the countries that can define reality through access and evidence. A nation that keeps stations running, supplies remote camps, and publishes high-quality data shapes what the world believes is happening, and that shapes what the world decides next. This is why Antarctica attracts investment even when profit is not immediate. The payoff is institutional memory, mapping archives, logistics expertise, and relationships that convert into influence during crises. When a protected area is proposed, when a quota is disputed, or when an ice shelf shows signs of rapid weakening, the countries with the strongest observational networks often set the terms of discussion. They can show the clearest images, provide the longest records, and argue from years spent measuring rather than guessing. Antarctica also tests ethics, because scientific cooperation can be genuine while still serving national interest. Most researchers come for knowledge, not flags. Yet, their work becomes part of a geopolitical ledger the moment it informs policy or economics. Control here is not planting a marker. It is building the capacity to stay, to see, and to be listened to. Antarctica does not need cities or armies to shape the future, because it already shapes oceans, weather, and coastlines where billions live. The race is not only for territory, but for continuity, for the ability to keep learning when the planet becomes harder to predict. If you want more documentaries like this, subscribe, because the coldest places often decide the warm world's fate.